Hello and welcome to Leaders of Tomorrow, India's largest platform for entrepreneurs. We bring you expert advice on how to make and manage your money right, what you need to do when it comes to hiring right, innovation, strategy, anything and everything, in fact, that matters to the life of an entrepreneur being covered right here on the show. I want to welcome three of our experts here tonight on this budget special, decoding what they feel the government must do and should keep in mind when it comes to MSMEs and an eye on the budget. First up, I want to welcome Gopal Krishna Agarwal. He's the National Spokesperson, Economic Affairs at BJP. We also have Dilip Chenoy, Secretary General at FICCI, and Pranav Sayta, Partner and National Leader, International Tax and Transaction Services, Ernst Young. Gopal Krishna Agarwal, Dilip Chenoy, Pranav, thank you so much for taking the time to join us on this panel, talking to MSMEs about what they should be keeping in mind and what they should be keeping their eye on as far as the budget is concerned. So I want to start there and ask the three of you gentlemen, what is the one headline that you would like to see, expect to see, hope to see from the budget announcement? Maybe I can come to you first, Mr. Agarwal.
I think the most important at current point of time is keeping the inflation target in mind, because MSME and manufacturing and industries at present who are meeting me are talking about the rise in the commodity prices that is hurting them, whether steel, cement and other base metals. So I think that inflation targeting has to be more now become part of the policy currently. And second is about the unorganized sector. They should definitely expect some support, because unorganized sector data is not being captured. There is a certain amount of problems in that sector that is not being properly captured in the whole scenario, so that their problems will also, I think, will form part of the government policies in this budget.
I do want to come back and talk about some of the labor reforms that experts like yourself are looking forward to. But quick opening comments also from Dilip Chenoy.
Yeah, Sunanda, so if you were at this time on the 1st of February, the headline would be, this is a growth-oriented and entrepreneurial promoting budget going forward, and will address the social infrastructure needs of India going forward. Just a very simple headline that we expect on the first afternoon after the finance minister has presented her budget.
Okay. Pranav?
Yeah, so very quickly, two things I would expect headlines on the budget. One would be a big demand push through an incentivization of spends and investments into infrastructure. Any long-term capital investments into the infrastructure sector, if they are incentivized through tax exemption, like is currently available to sovereign wealth funds and pension funds, available to any and every patient capital investment into the infrastructure sector. It will give a big push to infrastructure, improve Indian infrastructure, help businesses in general and make them more cost effective, productive, efficient, and at the same time create jobs and create a demand push for the business community. That is one. Second, if I move slightly away from the substantive steps, I would feel that a lot needs to be done in terms of ease of doing business. For example, providing clarity and certainty in the tax laws. And a lot of the provisions concerning tax deduction at source, tax collection at source, some of the disputes that are on, I would feel some amount of ease and clarity in that would significantly help, particularly MSMEs, in coping with and focusing on their business rather than multiple compliances, not only in tax but in various other laws. But in tax itself, there is a lot that can be done to ease compliances.
Okay, so I do want to talk about the message really that some of these ongoing disputes are giving to the international investing community, Vodafone, etc. But I want to dovetail that answer into my next question and talk about the overarching theme that we have here on the Leaders of Tomorrow, which is empowering a billion dreams. 2020, of course, not being a good year for businesses, particularly small businesses. My question to you, maybe Dilip, if you could, take this question on. We're talking about empowering a billion dreams for small businesses. What, in your mind, should the government perhaps do if they are to encourage the entrepreneurial community in the short term?
So I think the one lesson that COVID has actually taught us is that access to finance and access to digital infrastructure can actually
Okay.
create an entrepreneur out of anybody. So if the last decade was a decade of consumption, this decade is going to be a decade of creativity. So if you look at the lockdown, right? We had chefs, we had dance teachers, we had beauticians, we had even gym trainers. You take any service industry, because that was faced by lockdown, actually took a video, put it online, and some people started monetizing it and actually enabling that to happen. And a lot of that happened from tier 2 and tier 3. So if we allow a digital infrastructure to get in place, and the PM Wani scheme is a very good scheme which allows even small retailers and others to leverage and monetize the bandwidth that they're using and the internet connections that they're using, and enable people to actually connect, sell, use it, do a lot of things. So we need to actually double the expenditure on that. And while the target is 10 million kind of hotspots, we should be more aggressive and look at it in much more manner going forward. That digital infrastructure will enable that to happen. The second thing, very, very quickly, is that the access to finance. And not all MSMEs and not entrepreneurs have access to banking finance. And therefore, the digital space that has actually emerged in this, right? And where entrepreneurs, based on the digital accounts, their GST, digital payments, etc., are being given, loans by good fintech companies. Now, while that is happening, that the banking system got derailed by NPAs. I mean, all small and medium entrepreneurs who use the digital system should actually enable and look at paying back their loans on time. So it does not really creates a NPA situation there going forward. So if you can actually do this, expand the availability of finance to the 60 million, literally more than that, if you talk MSMEs, and if you go back to entrepreneurs also, right? That is important.
Sure.
These two things will actually dramatically change the lives of small and medium enterprises. And just one 30-second point or 10-second point, like Pranav said, ease of doing business, the cost of compliance has to reduce dramatically. The cost of compliance for a small and medium person and entrepreneur is extraordinarily high. That has to be brought down.
Okay, I want to go back to something that we started this panel with, and that was as far as labor reforms are concerned. It's open to the three of you, but maybe Mr. Agarwal, if you want to go first on this one. We've seen some sort of labor reforms announcements coming in, hiring and firing, for instances, for smaller businesses being made much easier. But on the other hand, we've also seen some of the labor disputes, for instance, in the state of Karnataka not too long ago coming to the fore. What more for businesses would you like to see? And under Make in India, the emphasis as far as restarting of factories, production, etc., and therefore the focus on hiring, the focus on labor reforms, wages, etc. What do you want to see?
I think the public domain and narration should now start discussing the four codes which are already been passed by the parliament but have not yet been notified. And there lot of changes are there with regard to social infrastructure welfare for the unorganized sector. This resentment which is coming in Karnataka, what we see is basically coming from the contract labor or people who are not in the mainframe of the employment. So I think this is the area, because otherwise in April we will see the same kind of agitation from the labor unions which we see from the farmers, when there is a lot of consensus at the time when they are put in the public domain, nobody discusses. And I think it is an important thing for the media and the industry and everybody to start discussing. so that by the time actually they are implemented, we find less resistance to them. And that is also very important, that unorganized sector, which I said earlier, should get certain segments have to be identified in the unorganized sector. Just one sector I'll just point out is about the schools, which are unaided schools in the countries. Their teachers are finding a difficult situation. They are not got any benefit. So government has to look into certain segments of unorganized sectors and go for direct benefit transfers for those particular sectors, because they are feeling a lot of punch. That will increase the demand also and help the thing. In that, these are the important things that I would like to see in the labor reform. Ultimately, where contract labor has to be brought into the mainstream. Without hire and fire, I don't think labor reforms can take place. That is the thing that I wanted to mention here.
Gentlemen, I'm going to take a quick break. On that note, we're going to continue this budget special right here on the Leaders of Tomorrow. That's on the other side. Do stay tuned. Welcome back. You're with us here on Leaders of Tomorrow. Putting more money into the hands of consumers on one hand, and on the other, actually ensuring that money is being spent. How can demand be brought back? Pranav, maybe I could come to you on this. We talk about one of the easiest things to do, of course, apart from announcements on direct and indirect taxes, is infrastructure spending. But government expenditure really hasn't changed. If you are expecting some announcements, some changes really to happen as far as demand, consumption, sentiment, etc., in the budget, is there anything?
Private sector investments into infrastructure should be welcomed in a big way, and that could give a big demand push. And I believe strongly that that is absolutely the need of the hour, and that could generate jobs, create a demand push for sure. But fiscal room, admittedly, as you rightly said, seems limited. Also, I think in the limited fiscal room that is available, putting money in the hands of that particular segment of the population, which really could help spur demand, is the most important thing. So in terms of direct taxes, for example, if at the individual level, at least in certain tax brackets, if tax can be even for a temporary period reduced, provided certain spendings happen, then that could give a big demand fillip immediately. And especially in the current environment where there is a significant need for ensuring that this growth which we are seeing in Q3 and Q4 is not just pent up demand showing up in growth, but is sustainable growth, that becomes extremely relevant. Also for the MSME sector, giving some tax benefits in terms of maybe spending on certain expenses, which give either a higher rate of depreciation or amortization on some of the expenses, could go a long way in helping them also spur up their supply side, as well as in turn becomes demand for others. So I would feel these are the two things from a direct tax standpoint, apart from some benefits for the indirect taxes, particularly the services part of the economy. If the GST can be reduced somewhat, it could be extremely advantageous, maybe 15%.
Mr. Chenoy, we were talking about labor and manpower, and I understand that one of the things that you've submitted in your wish list to the government is as far as ESOPs, pertaining, of course, more to startups. But anything that you can sort of discuss on today's show about what you would like to say on that?
Yeah, I think two issues. One, to take forward the point very quickly, what Mr. Agarwal mentioned. You see, the new labor wage code has certain provisions which, with the same C2C, you might end up taking less salary back home. Because they define, the allowances as a certain percentage of the basic, right? And many people actually take their wages to ensure that they get maximum C2C. So if that issue can be resolved, right, and maybe a floor level or something put there, it could be lend more money. Otherwise, a lot of the my salary included would go into our PF and long-term savings rather than money in the hand. That was the first thing. The second thing was that
Yeah.
both the states and the central government should actually look at, because many of the stress sectors, especially tourism, small restaurants, small kiranas, where people are in the ESI scheme. So they need to look at, maybe saying that, okay, you don't contribute for the next 2 to 3 months or 4 months to the ESI, but once when the thing gets going, then you can actually add and contribute more to make up the loss, right? And the government could actually give a temporary loan to the ESI to get their investments going. That's the second thing, which put more money in the hands of people. The third thing is that the way they tax ESOPs now is when they're vested, not when they are actually utilized, right? So if I get a ESOP now, I have to pay tax when it vests in me, not when I encash it. And the second thing is that it's not applicable to all startups. It's only applicable to those startups that are recognized by the DPIIT, which is a small fraction of the total number of startups and organizations in India. So if these two things could be done, a lot more, cash in hand will be available, and there are a huge number of startups around the country, and also other organizations also may find this as a way to incentivize their employees. So these were the specific things as far as this point goes.
Okay, I do want to bring up funding and the liquidity situation. What perhaps is your opinion as far as the liquidity situation is going to be, and what is it going to look like in your opinion, gentlemen, open to the three of you, in 2021? Will it be easier for entrepreneurs to raise funds? What should the government do if they're trying to encourage banks to actually lend much more? FI inflows were looking good as of the end of 2020. Given that Vodafone seems to be really coming back, and therefore investor sentiment perhaps is getting hit, do you think that's going to continue in 2021? What should the government do? What should perhaps industry bodies maybe like yours, Mr. Chenoy, do? What should the entrepreneurial ecosystem really do if we want to ensure that there is actually more liquidity in the system available to entrepreneurs? Maybe I can come to you first on that, Mr. Chenoy.
So I think the fundamental issue in this whole bank, government, entrepreneur equation is trust. So there's been a complete erosion of trust. One side feels that the entrepreneur takes money which he or she does not want to return back. The banks feel that it is going to be an NPA. The government feels that there's a collusion between the lender and the borrower. So there's a whole mistrust there. So the first thing that all enterprises and business people can do is actually repay their loan, keep up their commitment that is there. The second thing which is required here is that banks are deposit rich and equity poor. NBFCs are equity rich but deposit poor. So we need to equate the NBFCs in the banking system, at least some specific things, and you need a lot many more banks in India going forward. And the banks need to lend. If you see, why was the emergency credit guarantee loan scheme actually extended for a period? Because the 3 lakh crores were able to be disbursed, right? The banks say that there are no valid proposals. The business firms say that banks are not accepting our proposals. So we need to actually bridge this kind of a deficit which is there. So this is the number one issue. The second thing is, in finance, for project finance, for long gestation periods of capital nature, investment by MSMEs, they used to have the capital support scheme, which is not there, but we need availability of low cost, the old development bank type of ICICI, IDBI, 6%, 3 to 4 year moratoriums, 10-year repayment period. We need that financing for non-infrastructure projects, because every time we talk of development finance, it always goes to infrastructure. But I think for medium and small industries, to enable them to get competitive, they will not be competitive if we don't lower the cost of finance, don't lower the cost of power and electricity, don't make logistics simple. These have to be areas of focus going forward.
Do either of you want to add to that, or I'm going to take closing comments because we're running out of time on the panel?
Yeah, the important thing that is coming to my information is about the inflation. I would like the budget to continue focus more on inflation, because the raw material cost is increasing very much, and that has also be because over the some period in the past, import duty etc. have been increased, custom duty, import duty, and other things, and the supply chain in the GST etc. are and the bilateral trade agreements etc. have resulted in higher cost of raw materials. So the government will have to look and rectify this, because this will hamper, I think, if inflation will hamper the MSME sector and manufacturing sector a lot.
My first point is that we need to actually foster the spirit of innovation. We need to bring back challenge funds for specific social problems and national problems, introduce challenge funds, and we need to go back to the restoration of that weighted deduction for R&D. The second thing is, in tier 2, tier 3 cities and rural India, we need to ramp up productive social expenditure, healthcare, hospitals, other things, courthouses, like improving the infrastructure around industrial parks, improving connectivity. And therefore, in the Atmanirbhar package, they had actually got some schemes where if the state government undertook reforms, the center would actually support. So the same thing could be actually done in the budget for this quick, productive infrastructure, which would be done in the short term in 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, 6 months, not long gestation projects that will increase demand, create employment, and also improve the life of people in tier 2, tier 3 cities and also in other areas. These are the 2 points I'd like to end with.
Pranav, I'm going to let you have the last word. Given all the fiscal constraints that we have, given that demand really needs to come back urgently into the system, what would you want to leave our viewers with tonight?
Yeah, so I think one thing that probably hasn't been touched too much is what I feel is going to be critical here. One is, how do you promote NBFC lending in India? And whether it is through refinancing, whether it is through priority sector certificates to NBFCs, whether it is through the modus operandi of specific priority sector norms for NBFCs, but it is critical to ensure that we promote NBFCs, they have the reach, and also maybe microfinance institutions. So these two are I think key in going to be able to spread to MSMEs and retail. The other is infra lending bottlenecks which need to be removed, like pre-approvals, project delay compensation, etc., to get infra financing going. I think to a large extent that will be key in ensuring that some of the demand push that we intend achieving and the liquidity gets going into the system, into the bloodstream.
Thank you very much for your time here on the panel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We've run completely out of time on this episode of Leaders of Tomorrow. If you have anything that you as an entrepreneur feel the government should keep in mind when it comes to the budget, do let us know. Our contact details is up on your screens as we speak. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.